He didn't raise his voice. He didn't draw his weapon. He just held his ground in front of a door with no name, and a man who once helped brief the President of the United States. The memo looked real, the badge scanned green, and the visitor, calm, connected, carrying intelligence the king was supposedly waiting for. But one detail didn't match. One protocol wasn't cleared. And this royal guard, standing in the quiet heart of Buckingham Palace, refused to blink. So what happens when a former US National Security Advisor tries to step into the king's most secure briefing room, and one silent guard says, "No"? Before we reveal what the forged document really said, and how a single decision may have prevented a diplomatic scandal, hit subscribe, turn on the bell, and tell us where in the world you're watching from. Because this isn't just a story about access, it's about the man who knew when not to open the door. The corridor outside sub-level 3 didn't hum like the rest of Buckingham Palace. No tourists, no marble echo. Just the low breath of ventilation shafts, and the kind of silence that meant something classified was happening on the other side of a wall. Sergeant Alaric Denham had been posted there since just after 9 that morning. 15 years in the Coldstream Guards had taught him when quiet meant calm, and when it meant control. Today's silence wasn't peaceful, it was engineered. The door behind him had no name. Internally, it was called the Continuity Wing, but those who'd memorized the sovereign's rotation codes knew it by something else: the King's War Room. They never said it out loud. Denham stood in matte black sub-level uniform. No parade red, no bearskin for show. Just encrypted shoulder badge, polished boots, and the Queen's cipher stitched beneath his collarbone. Everything about this floor was built for function, not ceremony. A digital panel beside the door displayed 4 lines. Session. Name, Internal Sovereign Review, Phase 1. Participants, 5, confirmed access level, UK eyes only. Security status, amber hold. His job was simple. Hold the corridor. Let no one through without the right clearance code, not just the right name, and wait for the session to flip live at 10:40. The palace equerry passed by, clipboard in hand, voice low. Session flips in 30, one bad scan, and we reset the whole corridor. Denham didn't look over. Then we keep it exact. The equerry nodded and kept walking. Denham shifted his weight slightly, heel to toe, checking readiness without moving his frame. The light above the door stayed amber, pending, frozen. He'd memorized the approved entry list that morning. 5 names, all British, all cleared through the Crown Office, with counter-signatures that matched the King's private secretary. 2 from the Ministry of Defence, 1 from MI5's Strategic Assessment Division, 1 senior policy advisor, and the King's principal private secretary himself. No Americans, no external liaisons, no joint briefings. He checked the King's schedule on his wrist display. No American liaison listed until afternoon, no inbound diplomatic briefing, no exception logged. But 10 minutes later, he heard shoes he wasn't expecting. The first sign something was wrong didn't come from the man, it came from the badge. A silver SUV rolled through the South Arch just past 10. Diplomatic plates, subdued British escort, nothing flashy. But Denham's internal alarm tripped immediately. The Royal Household schedule showed no inbound American cleared for sub-level 3, sir. The doors opened. The man who stepped out moved like someone who'd done this before. Mid-40s, navy suit, diplomatic satchel held flat. No entourage, no hesitation. "Morning," he said, extending credentials. "Kash Patel, former US National Security Counsel, here for the ISR packet briefing." Denham took the ID without expression. Photo matched. Name matched. The hologram shifted correctly under the light. But the barcode on the back scanned red. Valid for level 2 access, not sub-level 3, not the suite. "You're not on the compartmental roster," Denham said. Patel didn't flinch. "I was asked to bypass public routing. Bilateral intel handoff. Code window closes in less than an hour." He reached into the satchel and pulled out a printed memo, gold-embossed crown at the top. Defence routing stamp. Familiar UK insignia that usually sat on top of the most classified briefings in the building. Denham took it, read the routing code. MOD INT-R, name you R, CRN, WS, PNUOP. Close, very close, but not exact. He held the document under the corridor light, angling it slowly. The paper stock felt right, heavy, cotton-based, the kind the Crown Office used for sensitive distribution. But when he tilted it toward the recessed fluorescent panel overhead, something caught his eye. The watermark. It was there, but it bore the Tudor crown, the Queen's cipher. Since King Charles took the throne, every Crown Office document used the St. Edward's crown. Only archivists or someone working from outdated templates would still print the old seal. Denham's eyes moved to the date block. The format was older too. Day, month, year, separated by periods, not slashes. That style had been phased out in early 2022 under the new sovereign's administrative updates. Small, almost invisible, but wrong. And then there was the session name itself, Joint Compartmental Exchange Session. He'd seen hundreds of war room directives. They never used that phrasing. The British system called them phase access or operational continuity review. The word exchange implied reciprocity, sharing. This room didn't share. It absorbed, analysed, decided, and kept. Denham kept his tone level. This isn't cleared by the private secretary's office. It came through the cabinet office, Patel replied. Not the palace. Denham nodded once. War room access doesn't originate from Whitehall. It acknowledges it, doesn't answer to it. A British aide in a grey jacket stepped forward, voice tight. You're obstructing an Allied intelligence transfer. Denham didn't turn to him. His eyes stayed on Patel. I'm preventing an unsanctioned breach of a compartment that doesn't appear on any schedule for today. The aide's face flushed. The document's right there. Crown seal, MOD routing code. What more do you need? Denham's reply was quiet, precise. A counter-signature from the Crown Office, which this doesn't have. He tapped a small button beneath his collar. Not an alarm, a local signal. The panel light dimmed but stayed amber, extended hold. A notification appeared on the terminal, awaiting manual validation, Crown Office alerted. Somewhere above them, in the King's outer office, a single secure screen would have just lit up. Patel noticed the movement. He didn't object, just said quietly, then get someone who can validate it. Denham's reply was calm. I already have. No raised voices, no accusations, just protocol moving silently through stone. The corridor had gone still, but it wasn't quiet anymore. Tension doesn't need volume. It lives in breathing, in posture, in the way someone stops trying to look relaxed. Denham, trained to detect the difference between calm and calculation, could feel every unspoken demand in the air. Patel hadn't moved since the hold, arms folded now, waiting. His posture suggested patience, but Denham noticed the slight tightening of his jaw, a man accustomed to access, suddenly finding himself outside it. The British aide had lost his composure. Sir, he said sharply to Denham, you've logged an amber hold during an Allied protocol window. You're risking diplomatic friction over what may be a formatting error. Denham didn't look up from the memo. Clearance strings don't have formatting errors. They're either correct or they're not. The aide's jaw clenched. He's delivering ISR materials on behalf of a mutual security framework, time-sensitive intelligence that directly impacts UK national security. Then he'll be read in through the correct framework. The aide took another step forward, close enough now that Denham could see the small beads of sweat forming at his temple. Do you understand who you're dealing with? Mr. Patel has briefed heads of state. He's been inside SCIF facilities across 3 continents. He's not some random contractor. Denham's eyes lifted slowly from the document. His voice didn't change pitch, didn't sharpen. It simply carried the weight of institutional certainty. Then he'll understand why protocol exists and why it doesn't bend for resumes. The aide opened his mouth to respond, but Patel raised one hand slightly, a subtle gesture. Enough. Patel pulled out a slim phone, unlocked it with a thumbprint. His eyes met Denham's. "I'll call Director Braden at the Ministry of Defence. He sponsored my clearance for the last brief at Lancaster House." "Secure line only," Denham said evenly. "Speaker mode. You're not stepping past the line." Patel nodded. Professional. No ego in it. The call connected in seconds. A clipped British voice answered. "Braden? It's Kash. I'm at the Palace. Blocked outside the continuity suite. They're saying I don't have access." There was a pause, just a beat, but long enough for Denham to notice. Braden's reply came carefully. "What session?" "Phase 1, internal sovereign review." Another pause, longer this time. "Kash? That session's UK eyes only. I told your aide the initial brief was Phase 2 only. You're not cleared for Phase 1. Silence dropped like a stone. The aide's face went from flushed to pale in the span of a breath. Patel's voice stayed level, but there was an edge now. Controlled frustration. "Then I need someone who can validate next step access. Now! Because I was told explicitly that I was expected inside that room." "By who?" Braden's tone had shifted. No longer casual, investigative. Patel glanced at the aide, who suddenly looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "My liaison coordinated it. I assumed clearance had been arranged through your office." "It wasn't." Braden's voice was flat. "Hold the line, routing you to the Crown liaison desk." The call clicked, held. Denham glanced at the war room panel. 10 minutes until red lock. The aide's hands were trembling slightly now. He'd stopped trying to argue, just stood there, staring at the memo in Denham's hand like it might suddenly combust. Denham kept his posture exact. He didn't gloat, didn't even acknowledge the shift in power. He just waited. The phone clicked again. A woman's voice came through, precise and calm. "Crown Liaison, authorization name. Kash Patel, former NSC, liaison for ISR Window 7B. Please hold while your name is reviewed against Phase 1 clearance logs." 15 seconds of silence. Then, "Mr. Patel, your name appears on the Phase 2 access roster only, scheduled for 1400 hours in the Sovereign's side briefing room. You are not authorized for Sub-Level 3 at this time." Patel exhaled slowly through his nose. "Understood. Can you confirm who submitted my credentials for Phase 1 review?" A pause. Keystrokes audible in the background. "That request did not come through Crown Office channels. It appears to have originated externally." Patel's eyes cut to the aide. "Externally?" The woman's voice remained neutral. "Correct. No internal authorization was logged." Patel ended the call, slid the phone back into his jacket, looked at Denham with something that wasn't quite respect, but close. "Looks like someone made a mistake." Denham's response was quiet. "Or someone made a move." The aide's voice cracked slightly. "This is insane. The king wants that brief." Denham's response was quiet, final. "Then the king's desk will confirm it. That's the difference between assumption and access." 5 minutes later, the corridor changed. Not with noise, but with the kind of shift that made even stone seem to stand straighter. First came the click of regulation shoes, precise, not heavy, followed by the faint rustle of a document satchel and the quiet murmur of an encrypted comm being switched off. The man who appeared around the corner wore no uniform, but the moment he stepped into view, both Patel and the aide straightened instinctively. Mr. Aldrich Vale, the King's private secretary. Denham had only spoken to him 3 times in 15 years, but every guard in the inner perimeter knew him. The man who handed folders to the sovereign before broadcasts. The man who saw the red boxes opened before ministers were briefed. He didn't greet anyone, just extended one hand toward Denham. The document. Denham placed the memo into his palm. Next came Commander Harriet Stone, Director of Royal Security, silver hair pulled back tight. She carried a folded tablet case and was already reviewing something on screen as she walked. Behind her, two more figures, one from the Cabinet Office in dark grey, another from the Ministry of Defence, stripes on his collar, calm and narrowed expression. Vale turned the memo over twice, held it up to the light the same way Denham had. His eyes tracked the watermark, the date formatting, the routing code. He said nothing for nearly 20 seconds. Then he looked at Patel. "You came here in good faith?" Patel nodded. "I was told the king requested visibility. The document came through a channel I've used before. If it's faulty, I want to know why." Commander Stone's eyes narrowed. "Did you generate this, or was it handed to you?" "Handed by my liaison." Stone passed her tablet to Vale. On the screen was a side-by-side comparison. The memo Patel had brought, and an authentic Crown Office directive from 2 weeks prior. The differences were subtle but unmistakable. Watermark, date format, routing suffix, session nomenclature. Stone spoke quietly. "We've scanned it. The seal matches a Crown Office watermark last used in May 2022. The routing code is nearly correct, but the private suffix ID was never assigned. Whoever made this had access to old templates, maybe even old hardware." The MOD officer added, "Also, the session name, Joint Compartmental Exchange, isn't used in sovereign review briefing. That's Five Eyes nomenclature. This room doesn't run joint." The British aide's voice came out barely above a whisper. "It was supposed to be a bridge. That's all. I was told it would smooth coordination." Vale's eyes shifted to him. "Told by whom?" The aide hesitated, swallowed. "A contractor, former MOD. He said he still had access to routing systems, said it would expedite clearance." Stone's voice went cold. "Name." The aide gave it. Vale folded the memo once and slipped it into an evidence pouch. He looked at Patel, not with accusation, but with something closer to sympathy. "You were almost walked into a diplomatic incident, one designed not to embarrass you, but to discredit this institution's protocol for who gets close to the crown." Patel's tone was respectful but edged. "Then someone forged that with deep access." Stone answered quietly. "They had the look, not the instincts." She turned to Denham. "You held the line." Denham didn't reply. The corridor, now filled with advisors and investigators, said, "Enough." No one touched the door. It hadn't opened. And because of that, everything that followed would be handled without a leak, without a breach, without a single file crossing into the wrong hands. By now, the war room door had become more than a security barrier. It had become a mirror. Everyone in the corridor had quietly rearranged their positions. Only Denham remained unchanged, still anchored at the threshold, one step left of centre. The amber light above the panel had begun its slow transition to red. Phase 1 was entering lockdown. Private Secretary Vale stood slightly apart, reviewing a new file delivered through a secure tablet. Commander Stone spoke quietly with the MOD officer, their words clipped and coded, too discreet to overhear, too coordinated to be casual. Then the verdict arrived. Calm. Instructional. "Phase 1 remains UK eyes only," Commander Stone said. "The ISR window opens again in Phase 2. In the Sovereign's side briefing room, Mr. Patel will be received there with MOD presence." She turned to Patel directly. "Until then, we appreciate your patience." No apology, but no condescension. Patel gave a short nod. "The material I carry won't make sense without what's inside that room, but I won't compromise process." "Then you'll be welcomed into the next," Vale replied, "with your protocol intact." The aide, still standing near the rear, opened his mouth, perhaps to explain, perhaps to excuse. One glance from Commander Stone silenced the attempt. No one needed to ask who had handed him the forged memo. Denham stood quietly during it all, unmoving, unspeaking. And then, as the red light above the door lit fully, sealing Phase 1 from outside access, a soft tone echoed in Denham's earpiece. Access. Locked. Session. Live. Corridor. Frozen. He didn't move. Didn't need to. Commander Stone stepped beside him, just close enough for only him to hear. "Boundary held," He nodded once. "Protocol observed." Her voice lowered one step further. "You'd be surprised how many doors we've had to reopen after someone blinked at the wrong time." Denham didn't blink, didn't shift his weight. Some jobs didn't require movement, just presence. As the officials peeled off toward the Sovereign's side briefing room upstairs, Patel followed behind, escorted by the MOD officer who had kept his tone neutral the entire time. No anger, no failure, just correction and containment. And still, the door behind Denham didn't open, because it never needed to. At precisely 11 a.m., the amber panel light faded into solid red. Phase 1 had begun. From this point forward, nothing came in. Nothing came out, not even whispers. The corridor, which had just held the weight of multiple government offices, was mostly empty again. The MOD officer had escorted Patel and the sanitized ISR folder to the Sovereign's side briefing room 2 levels up. The private secretary had returned to the King's outer chamber. Commander Stone had disappeared into a secured analysis bay to begin tracing the memo's origin. Only Denham remained, back where he'd started, alone, still. He allowed himself a controlled breath, measured in, slow out, not relief, just release. There was still a shift to finish, still a post to guard, but the pressure had passed. The British aide lingered a moment longer just outside Denham's peripheral. His jacket was no longer straight, the lanyard on his neck no longer a credential, just a reminder of how easily protocol could be misused. He said nothing. His posture betrayed apology. Denham didn't turn, didn't gloat. He wasn't there for anyone's feelings. Across the corridor, a small mirrored panel reflected part of the hallway. Denham could see Patel's silhouette in the reflection as he passed through the lift doors above. He paused before stepping inside, glanced once back down the hall, then offered a small, respectful nod, not to the building, but to the man still standing at the door that hadn't moved. Denham didn't respond. Moments later, a familiar voice came through his earpiece. "Guard post, status?" He tapped twice on the collar toggle. "Post intact, no breach. Amber hold resolved." "Copy. Stand by on corridor." And that was it. No medals, no announcement. Just one more moment logged. From up above, soft footsteps echoed briefly in the ventilation shaft. Someone walking through the King's outer vestibule. Perhaps a minister. Perhaps the King himself. Denham would never know, and it wasn't his to ask. He returned to his full posture, hands positioned precisely. Boots squared against the stone seam, rifle motionless. The session had started. The door had remained shut, and a boundary no one noticed most days had quietly done its job. Hours later, the corridor was still clean. You wouldn't know anything had happened. There were no lingering conversations, no rapid security debriefs, no statements to the press. Not about this. Everything that had unfolded between the war room and the man guarding it was now buried beneath encrypted time logs, royal household entries, and a single internal memo marked Amber Hold Review, Sub-Level 3, circulated only to 5 people. It was short, 3 lines long. Unauthorized document identified at Corridor 3C, Phase 1, hold upheld. Sergeant Denham correctly initiated Amber Extension under Standing Protocol 14B. No breach, no contact, no deviation. It didn't say who the document was handed to, didn't say who had forged it, didn't mention Kash Patel by name. That's how the palace worked. Names only lived in the logbook if they belonged to the building, and Denham's name was there, time-stamped, initialed by the Director of Royal Security. No citation, no medal. Just the cold precision of history being written down and filed away correctly. In another wing of the palace, the forgery trail was being traced quietly by a digital counterintelligence team embedded within the Cabinet Office. The source of the spoofed clearance had already been isolated to a compromised device used by an assistant with third-tier access. The contractor who'd supplied the template had been a former MOD analyst, retired 3 years prior, but still holding on to old system access that should have been revoked. He'd sold the service as a coordination facilitator, claimed he could expedite interagency clearances for a fee. The aide had paid him £1,200 to smooth the process. What he'd actually bought was a sophisticated forgery built from outdated Crown Office materials, close enough to fool most eyes, but not the ones trained to catch what didn't belong. By evening, that contractor's credentials would be fully suspended. By morning, he'd be facing questions from people who didn't need to raise their voices to be frightening. But that investigation happened in rooms Denham would never see. His part was finished the moment the door stayed closed. A few minutes before sunset, Denham completed his final corridor sweep and handed off his shift. The replacement, a younger guard with only 2 years into post-training, nodded silently at the exchange. "Anything I should know?" the younger guard asked. Denham adjusted his gloves. "Session ran clean, corridor held, standard protocols." The younger guard glanced at the now dark panel above the war room door. "Heard there was some commotion earlier." Denham's expression didn't shift. "There wasn't." And that was the truth. Because commotion implied chaos. What had happened here was the opposite. Order asserting itself. Quietly. Precisely. Denham paused for a moment beside the access log, watched his own name blink into the archive. One line, a timestamp, a seal. He didn't smile, didn't reflect. He simply turned and exited the corridor the same way he had entered it, invisible in plain sight. Back upstairs, the Sovereign's side briefing had concluded. The ISR materials had been reviewed in Phase 2, with Patel present, this time properly verified. No protests, no pride, just precision. He had delivered what he came to share, and before he left, he'd asked for one thing: the name of the man at the door. They told him. And though no meeting was arranged, no handshake exchanged, one note was quietly logged under the Ministry of Defence's courtesy roster that day. "Mr. Patel requests formal appreciation be relayed to Sergeant Alaric Denham for holding the line." That message never reached Denham, but the corridor didn't need him to hear it, because the door behind him had stayed closed. And that was the only acknowledgement that ever really mattered. Should a royal guard deny access to a former national security advisor, even if he's holding a document stamped with the crown? If that badge was yours, would you have held the line? Let us know in the comments. We read every single one. If you believe protocol matters, even when no one's watching, hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on so you never miss stories like this. And if you know someone who still thinks the Royal Guard is just for show, share this video with them. 2 more untold stories are already appearing on your screen. Watch those next, and we'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place, with another story you won't believe is true. Until then, stay sharp.